the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate. They welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Donald Cohen, founder and executive director of In the Public Interest, author, The Privatization of Everything, How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. Co-written with Allen Mikaelian. Also on the program today, surprise! Joe Manchin throws cold water on meaningful filibuster reform for voting rights. Labor Department reports a record 4.2 million people quit their crappy job in November. Trump cooked. Cancels his January 6th event because his handlers are afraid people will tune in. Meanwhile, disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo will not be prosecuted for groping by the Albany, New York DA. Sean Hannity asked to cooperate with the January 6th hearings after a massive release of his text messages to Mark Meadows. Thousands of Florida teachers and students out sick with Omicron. Chicago teachers vote to stay home today. Across the border, Canada will pay $31.5 billion to fix and compensate Indigenous victims of Canada's welfare system for First Nation children. And the DNC staff unionizes. Customs and Border Patrol to review a secret division they apparently have that has been spying on journalists and Congress members. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a lot to get to. It is Wednesday, of course. Emma is not here with us today. Emma Vigeland is out this week, but in her honor, I will note that it is Hump Day. First week back, we're in the midst of a massive Omicron surge. One correction or clarification. I'm not even sure I got this wrong yesterday, but that is how scrupulous. Scrupulous? What's the word I'm looking for, Matt?
I think scrupulous works.
Okay, thank you. I am in providing you the most accurate of information. I got a tweet that suggested that yesterday I said that there was no spike in hospitalizations from Omicron. There is a spike. It appears not to be commensurate with the size of the spike in infections. However, and I hope I've been clear on this, you can have, let's just say for the sake of argument, 100 infections and a 5% hospitalization rate, right? Where you would get 5 people hospitalized for every 100 infections. But even if you have a 3% hospitalization rate, but you have 1,000 infections or 600 infections, because Omicron is that much more contagious, you're still going to get a lot of people in the hospital. And certainly the problem we have, and we've seen numbers go up consistently in hospitalizations. It's always a lagging indicator. but the sense is that with Omicron, things move a little quicker than they did with the prior iterations of COVID. And I've been saying, I guess, really for a month about Omicron is that I suspect we're going to start to see some hospital failures and system failures around the country. And I still expect that we're going to see that as a function of the Omicron surge. I mean, it is everywhere. In New York, it's completely nuts right now. In Florida, apparently, there were thousands of teachers who were out because of illness yesterday, as well as students. I know this is the case. I've got two kids who go to public school in New York City, and their class size is about half of what it normally is. My son, his teacher is out. His principal is out. My daughter says that there are teachers and students out. And I gave my daughter the option of going to school or not. And it was really on the, and just for this week. Or not the entire week, but I mean, just the past couple of days, I should say. Today in Chicago, public school officials canceled classes because they're having a fight with the teachers union, whose members had threatened to stay home to force instruction online during this surge because Chicago is not providing the safety protocols that the teachers feel that they need. They have a shortage of tests. They don't have universal vaccination rate amongst the students. There's a bunch of staff members calling in sick. And what we're seeing in the media and in other quarters is this unbelievable reaction to what's going on in Chicago. Let me be clear. My son's in there today. He's got a substitute teacher. Half the kids are missing. He's not learning anything. The teacher's going to have to, when the teacher comes back, the teacher's going to have to go back over this. I mean, this is not a, he's not in there for education at this point. He's in there because, I feel particularly in his school, he's going to be safe. And I got nowhere else to put him. I could sit him in this office right now and he'd be sitting there watching, something on YouTube or something. But that's the bottom line. The point is that when you have teachers out sick, this many, and when you have this many students who are not coming in because their parents are worried about COVID, or maybe they have COVID, or maybe the kids have COVID, there's no education going on in these schools. So let's be honest here with why we want these schools opened at this moment or not remote. That is because there are people out there who want there to be business, want business to take place. They want to get into work or whatever. They want to deal with it. This is not anybody who's out there saying right now that you can't keep kids home from school, this week when there's a surge going on, which everyone predicts is going to be short-lived because of the nature of this variant. And they're talking about education. They're full of it. Here is not necessarily Exhibit A, but one of the exhibits. Play this. This is Morning Joe.
If you don't want to teach, don't teach.
Yeah.
Quit. Just stay at home and stop teaching children, okay? Because when you set up that barrier to getting back to class, when healthcare officials say that you can still be testing positive 30 days.
Hold on for a second. Pause it. It sounds weird to me. It sounds almost like Joe's not in a studio. Like he's in a more makeshift studio, it sounds like. Because the sound isn't quite as dead as it is when he's in studio. And why is there that bar in between the two of them? I mean, give me a break. None of these people are in studio. Give me a break. I wonder why that might be. Continue.
Well, you obviously, if that's your standard, you're either ignorant when it comes to science, or you just don't want to be in classes. And if you don't want to be in classes, that's fine. Listen, thank you for your service to our children. Now go get another job.
So in response to the...
I mean, this is just absurd. Yeah, teachers, they don't want to teach. They go in it for the lucrative pay and the respect that they get from society. I mean, it really is unbelievable. Going through a surge that like we haven't seen before, really. I mean, maybe since the very beginning. All of the schools probably should have been remote this week. They should have anticipated it. But the idea that this is about, teaching the kids. No, it's not. It's about warehousing the kids for a couple of days. And, it's perfectly reasonable that some people might say, I'm a little concerned about catching COVID. Maybe the chances of me dying are not as high as they were. We're not sure about long haul.
Maybe we should raise taxes on people like Joe Scarborough so we can pay teachers more for the hazard that they're putting themselves in.
That's one way of doing it. Maybe we could put more resources into it. Maybe we could pay for people to stay at home during this week so that we wouldn't have this intense need to warehouse the kids. I mean, and believe me, I want my kids at school. I want my kids at school so that I'm not sitting on the couch here, but I want my kids at school because I want them to learn. So I'm sensitive to this issue. But I have no idea what's going on in Chicago schools. And I can see the distance, the difference between what's going on in my son's school and my daughter's school. And that's in the same school system. So it's really sort of stunning to watch. And really, in many respects, this is a failure of the Biden administration in not being aggressive enough and getting tests into the hands of people, not setting protocols. We should be testing far more people as they go in. People should be, there should be tests everywhere. Like candy bars. It should be to get a test in this country. We will, we'll be talking to Donald Cohen, who is the founder and ED of the in the Public Interest, author of Privatization of Everything, How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America, and how we can fight back in just a moment. But first, a message from our sponsor, and also actually a, what would you call this? A piece of software, I guess, that we use. You may run a business. Well, you can supercharge your knowledge, your sales, and your success with Shopify. It's the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses. So upstarts, startups, podcasts, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Shopify powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale. You can reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps. That includes Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. Plus, you gain insights as you grow. You get a sense, where am I selling this? What's selling on this site as opposed to that site? Gives you detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. It's more than a store. Shopify grows with you. This is possibility. It is powered by Shopify. Now, for us, we have a fairly straightforward, what would you call it? Like a side hustle? I don't know that we're making that much money on the store. It's not a big money maker for us. We never tried for it, but it's really super easy for us to use. And it gives us an opportunity to sell our merch, have a sense of what's selling, what's not, We can play around with different things to get a sense of what, if we want to push the scarves as opposed to the pencils. But you can check it out at shop.majorityreportradio.com. It's been extremely helpful for us. And for you, you can go to shopify.com/majority, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial. Get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/majority right now. Shopify, shopify.com/majority. Check it out. All right, I want to welcome to the program Donald Cohen. He's the founder and the executive director of In the Public Interest, author of The Privatization of Everything, which he co-wrote with Allen Mikaelian. It is The Privatization of Everything, How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. Donald, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I enjoy your show.
Oh, well, thank you. I enjoyed your book. And in this topic, I still, and you're right about this, but I remember covering the 2008 privatization of the Chicago parking meters. And in many respects, this has been sort of the biggest go-to. Why don't we just start with that as an anecdote, and then we'll get into sort of some of the broader themes.
Yeah, it's a real cautionary tale. Right. So let's make sure people know what we're talking about. 2008, 2009, the Great Recession, cities are bleeding red ink. And that's the context. On a Friday, if you live in Chicago, you remember Mayor Daley at the time unveiled a proposal from a private consortium made up of Morgan Stanley, a sovereign wealth fund from the Middle East, and a national parking company, that they would give the city $1.1 billion up front. Remember, the city's bleeding, right? Like every city, in exchange for the city's control of the city's 36,000 parking meters for 75 years. Vote on Tuesday. Okay. Desperation. Also, you could speculate on the why, but no scrutiny, no diligence. They did the deal. Okay. So after the fact, they learned, the inspector general and other folks sort of looked at it and analyzed it. And two things were true. One was it's an incredibly stupid way to borrow money on your future parking meter returns. I mean, everybody borrows money on their future income, but 75 years, we don't know if we're going to be driving, right? Even if it was the only thing they could do, they got hosed. They sold $1 billion too cheaply. That's the least important part. This is now, though, what's the most important is what they lost in their ability to run the city. For now, for the remaining 60 some odd years of the contract, of the deal, if the city wants to eliminate parking spots, either for a street fair for a weekend, but more importantly for bus rapid transit, for transit, for bike lanes, for street malls, so they got to buy the spots back. So think about the things a city does: land use, housing, environment, transportation, sort of really fundamental municipal responsibilities. The city council and the mayor's hands are tied. They don't do those things.
This dynamic reminds me of the investor dispute resolution mechanisms in stuff like NAFTA and in the TPP deal, where essentially the sovereignty of the in this case the city has been basically sold, and so they're going to have to pay. 75 years from now, hopefully we have hovercrafts and we don't need these parking spaces, or this is a pedestrian mall, like you say, or whatnot. And none of this can happen without the city paying this exorbitant penalty, essentially. And that gives, that opens up, I think.
And let me say that kind of to your question, why is this the right story to start with? It's a terrible deal. Everybody knows it was a terrible deal. But it gets at the heart of this. And this is a handing of control, handing of our democratic rights, our ability to make decisions to private interests. That's the most important lesson. And we see that throughout in all sorts of privatization of all sorts of stuff.
Well, let's talk about what do we mean when we say privatization? Because I think different people have different senses of what that means, and maybe you need to answer too as simultaneously. Again, what do we mean by public goods or public services?
Sure. I have a very specific definition of privatization that I use, and I'll mention it and then I'll describe it. So it's private control over public goods. So let me elaborate. Private control happens in a bunch of ways, over the things that matter to us. Outsourcing, for sure. Private prisons, private parking meters, water systems, just custodial services are outsourced, and in school systems and school districts and things like that. All that's definitely handing over control because it's all got contracts, right? The contract becomes paramount. But I also believe that it's also about austerity. When we cut taxes and we don't have enough public revenue for things that we all need, like college, like childcare, like things that are essentials for all of us to survive, then we're kind of left in the market to fend for ourselves, right? It also, when we don't have the resources to oversee and to monitor, the laws that we pass around, food safety, say we have laws and, we should be monitoring those, processing lines of chickens and lettuce and all those things. Companies monitor themselves and bad things happen because they either, they cut corners or they hire external monitors that are responsible to the people paying to them. So they don't look for everything. So it's, there's a set of, and then, so, also when we don't adequately regulate something like the air, right? And we don't monitor when we do regulate, then again, we're giving control of the things that are essential to us, clean air and the environment and the planet, to private interests that have real clear, purpose.
And we should say that when we hand these things over, their incentive structure is very often divergent from the rest of ours, right? I mean, it is, regardless of what government does, it is redistributing society's wealth in one form or another. And this really just comes down to a question of who's going to get it? Is it going to be spread around to the greatest number of people, both in terms of, I guess you could say in terms of financial wealth and in terms of political power, or is it going to be reserved for a narrow subset of people? And that's basically what it comes down to. That's
right. And it's not just wealth; it's also the stuff. It's the wealth and what we need. I didn't get to the part about the public goods. The way I define it is, I define it differently than the economics textbooks define it. I won't get into that now, but it's the stuff we all need to survive. Number one, health, education, knowledge, democracy, mobility, clean water, all that stuff. And they also happen to be the things that we can only do if we do them together, because we are interdependent. So we're transferring wealth when we privatize, but we're also transferring authority over those fundamentals. And so I think that's really important to understand.
Let's go through some of the examples that you lay out in your book. I mean, you go through at least a dozen, I guess, pretty close, of sort of major sectors and aspects of our lives, I guess, that have been privatized. Let me put it this way. I mean, I do want to cover, most of these, but from your perspective, what has been the most, I guess, problematic privatization? What sector is most problematic that you recount? Let's say and much of this has happened, particularly, I guess now over the past 40 some odd years, as sort of a neoliberal push sort of has reemerged, or has emerged, I should say. But what do you think? What sector has been the most problematic, or is there one?
Yeah, it's sort of like asking me to choose which child I like best, right? Let me answer it. I mean, there's a lot of horrors, right? Private prisons are horrible and things like that. But I'll answer in this way. My favorite section of the book is the section on community. And it's interesting. We talk about schools, we talk about parks, we talk about libraries, we talk about Social Security, because that's a community of the whole. So I'll answer it in that way. I think because it's the bigger impact. Let me focus on public education. So we are seeing right now, both in the growth of vouchers around the country, mostly in red states, but also the growth of charter schools, which are publicly funded, privately operated. There's good charters and bad charters, and that debate kind of goes off in that direction, unfortunately, too often. And what we're seeing is, the dismantling of I believe, or, creating 2 or 3 parallel education systems, right? We're turning us as, we're moving from a public service into a competitive environment, it's a market good, right? Where charter schools are competing for our kids and our families for their dollars and their attendance, right? Because the public dollars come with the kids. So I'm saying at the larger level here. So, and I can give lots of examples of that, but what's really important about that is it's dividing us as a nation increasingly. It's making us consumers as opposed to citizens. Consumers, if you're a parent right now, my kids are older now, but if you're a parent, as you are, you're going to look for the best school for your kid, period. You can't ask a parent to do anything else. But the more we turn parents into, but what's important to understand though, is that parents are now competing and schools are competing against each other, and they're segregating and stratifying in ways that may make sense for the family. You're picking what looks best for you, but it's dividing us. It's making us not be, in the same places, right? It's not, if you're not connecting, if you're not integrating, if you're not experiencing the public things together, like you would in a park or a school when I grew up, or a library and these other public things, we're hurting the country and we're hurting democracy in profound ways.
And we should say, we spent a lot of time talking about charter schools over the past, 15 years or so. And I don't have a problem per se with the concept of charter schools, but this is a way of just basically also draining money from the public. And we saw this with Betsy DeVos. I think at one point, Betsy DeVos and her husband were interviewed, and they specifically said, we don't have a problem with public education. We just have a problem with public schools. The idea being that we want the money to come into the public education coffers, but then we want to be able to distribute. In their instance, I think they wanted it really for parochial schools, for religious schools, but they also wanted to be able to privatize portions of it. And the fact is, you're going to leave behind large segments of the population who are going to get a substandard education because the money is going to be drained out of the system.
That's right. There's something also really important about that, about the charter schools. They're good charter. The problem with charter school debate is you get to, are they good? Are you for them or against them? It's completely useless and discussion. The issue is the original idea of charters is good. Create laboratories of innovation. Learn new things, create some, environments where that can happen, but then share, right? So that everyone can benefit from that. That's not what it is anymore. Now it's become a market good. And so, and you get the distortions that come with markets. So what happens? Schools are now, they're referred to as creaming and cropping, that are, charter schools are figuring out ways, even though it's illegal in most cases, to either not enroll or push out kids that are more expensive, that are harder to educate. And that's going on all over the place. You may have read it in New York. There was a principal that had a quote, got to go list. And it was just, figuring out how to push out those kids. And that happens, all over the place. But the other thing is private in the market, competitors don't share, right? A number of teachers in a number of charter schools around the country have to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that prevent them from sharing the school's trade secrets. What are those trade secrets? Lesson plans, curriculum, teaching methods. So, when you took a good idea and you turned it into a market good, that's what's the problem with charter schools.
And so when you talk about that section on community, this is really about the sort of the stratification that it creates in the context of our citizenry. And when you have multiple different sort of destinies or fates for people in the context of a society, it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in many respects.
Right. That's right. Why would you want to pay taxes if all you need is what you need? if you don't trust anybody else, if you think that's, the money you're going to spend is going to help somebody else and not us. So I think the division that, one of the things I say is a privatized America is a divided America. And, we could talk for a long time about division America, particularly this week.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's talk about the at one point you cover science and research, public science and research. We're seeing, both a whole. Well, we have three major vaccines that were developed with, to some extent or another, huge public investment. Same with the Pfizer pill, essentially the therapy for COVID. How widespread is this? I mean, do we have much by way of private scientific, I guess, and achievement that is not funded by the public in some fashion or another?
I don't believe so, and I can't speak universally, just to our research. So an interesting thing about the vaccines that I find interesting is that, the reason that it was sequenced so quickly, the virus, a couple of years back now, is in great part because of the massive investment in the Human Genome Project in the 90s, which was basic science. It wasn't applied science. And what happened with all that money and all that research is that the technology got developed, I'm sure publicly and privately, figuring out how to do it, to sequence genes. And that's how we sequence it so quickly and how we're sequencing the variants so quickly. So there's both massive, there's basic science that we invest in, which is vital, right? It's not directed by profit or, a product. And then there's also, as you mentioned, there's lots of investment just in the stuff itself. We gave Moderna a grant, we gave Pfizer a pre-buy agreement. Johnson & Johnson, I don't recall, but you can do this. I mean, first off, we don't want people to have to pay for it, so you have to have public money involved. Again, that gets to this point. We now know that the health of all of us depends on the health of each of us. That's a lesson from COVID. So basically mean everybody's got to have it. You can't do that if it's the markets determining who gets. You got to have public. Now, the hospital, I got my last shot at CVS, that's fine, but I didn't pay for it because it's a public essential.
We haven't all quite learned that lesson from COVID, I should say, sadly, but that is the case. Talk about the justice system. I had no idea. I have a sense of the privatization in the form of arbitration and in many respects sort of closing the courtroom doors. I had no idea what was going on with Georgia, where you got to pay to find out what the law is.
Well, there's a good answer. I mean, ultimately that got overturned, but I'll tell the story, after we wrote the book. So this goes to, austerity. The state of Georgia, I'll give the facts a little bit of a context. There's the state code, the official code of Georgia, but there's also another code that's the official code of Georgia annotated. Okay, the annotated code is the only accurate one because it's got the updates of amendments and judicial, the results of legal cases and things like that. The state didn't want to pay for that anymore, access to that anymore, maintaining it and providing free access, so they outsourced it. They gave it to LexisNexis. Okay, so now what used to be, and I think in my sense, probably yours as well, what should be available to everyone, the ability to know what the law is, right? That's sort of fundamental to democracy. Now you got to pay for it. Okay, well, before you had to pay for it. And a fair amount of money, it was like $400 for a CD, or I can't remember, CD and pay, you got to pay. Okay. And then the kicker was they copyrighted it. I mean, it became a private good. The copyright was owned by LexisNexis. So, good government activists, they took it and they made it available, for everybody. They broke the law, I guess, the copyright law. Ultimately, it came out good for them and us. But that's the instinct. Turn a public good, an essential public good, into a private commodity.
Well, what is driving this? I mean, is there? I mean, I guess there's two sides of this ledger, right? Is the implications of it and the incentive structure. The incentive structure, it just seems to me, for the most part, is people want to make money, and so they come and pitch this, and some level of corruption in the context of government on whatever level it is. And some level of like ideological, I guess, influence on government, which is that we exist as a society only for some people to make a lot of money.
Yeah, well, no, that's a great point. Great question. I think you got it right. So first off, important to recognize businesses do one thing: they sell things and they see a market. Before COVID, and right now it's more, but before COVID, we were spending, governments in America, from local to federal, we're spending about $7 trillion a year. Okay, you're running a private prison corporation. What do you want? You want that, there was 100 billion there, you want a piece of it. So there's just, this is all about sales, for big push. The second, it's corruption, but you mentioned corruption, but it's also just, you're running a city and someone comes to you and says, cheaper, better, faster. I can take a problem off your hands. Then where it kind of bleeds into the ideological is, okay, well, I'll get rid of this thing. Maybe I have a relationship with them, but maybe not, but maybe it sounds good. But it's also because there is this embedded belief ideologically that, the market's probably better anyway. Private sector is more efficient. The public sector is not. I can get rid of workers. I can do a set of things. So I think, they're in a sea of, of pro-market ideology and anti-government ideology that has been, we've been, bombarded with for the last 40 years. And that's kind of embedded deeply in governance at all levels.
When you're making the case that there is a problem with privatization, is it why? I guess what do you deploy? What's more important to deploy here, I guess? Is it the argument that many times this is not really ultimately the most efficient way of doing this? Because, I mean, just whether you look at like our response to Hurricane Katrina, where you had contractors who contracted out to other contractors to get those buses to come to New Orleans that day, and they kept them, in the parking lots 3 hours away because they didn't want to waste money if it wasn't absolutely necessary, and then they were too late? Or is it just, is the argument one about a more ideological one more that is more about maintaining democracy and a greater, a more democratic control over the goods and services that we need and have as a society?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll just say on the efficiency part, I'll bookmark that because it just turns out not to be true. And there's, it's worth peeling into that. But I'll set that aside. I think it's definitely the democratic, the idea that we should democratically be able to determine what everybody gets, number one, and we should be able to set standards for health, for the environment, for economy, for all those public essentials is the most important thing that we can decide, not the market can decide. Now, it doesn't mean that the public does everything. There's private in everything, right? The private contractors build the roads. There's, it's sort of all the above. But the question of who's in charge are on the essentials. And either we deliver it, we provide it in public schools, or we regulate it and make sure that it's living up to those standards, and make sure we add, cops on the beat, as it were, to make sure that those standards are enforced and lived up to. That's the most important thing that we need to, if we want to pivot American society and politics, we need to go there.
Let's talk about the efficiency, because there is this, there is this, I guess, and which I think you would argue also is a false belief that it's just simply more efficient, that private enterprise can move more efficiently. I don't know how anybody who has ever worked in any type of large corporation can actually believe this, but what do we have a sense of, is there data on this?
I don't know if there's large data on that, but I'll peel into it in a different way. So first off, big organizations are complex. big government, big corporations are complex, lots of bureaucracy. So let's just set that aside, right? There's lots of examples of they say they'll do it cheaper and they end up not being able to do it cheaper. So that's the thing. But what's really important to understand is when folks say we can do it more efficiently, what it really means is they can do it cheaper, right? More, less expensively. Okay, so it's really important to ask the question, okay, means you're going to spend less on something. What? Tell us exactly what you're going to spend less on, because it's not an infinite number of possibilities. It's quite finite. Let's say a prison, right? Fewer corrections officers, and they do that. There was a prison in Mississippi, I think a juvenile detention facility in Mississippi that went from 1 to 12 staff to inmate ratio to 1 to 60. Bad things happen when you do that. You could pay them less, and pay them working, wages and benefits and all that, which they do, and that creates higher turnover. And there's sort of impacts of all these things. So you can do that. You could use not as high quality stuff, food. You could have lower quality food, which prisons have done. And that creates more dangerous prisons. There was maybe closer to you in Michigan and Ohio, it was outsourced. Their food services were outsourced to Aramark. They lowered the quality of the food. There were found maggots in the food. There are two things that you need to make sure you have clear to have prisons not be dangerous, and that is access to phones and good food. Those are the key. The people in corrections tell me. So that's what efficiency means, right? To serve less, because again, on the flip side of that, we have to remember when a private company comes in, they have to pay their investors, their shareholders. They have much higher CEO, executive compensations. They do lobbying and campaign contributions. They do have debt service because they're buying up other companies. So they have all these other costs that are every dollar of those things are things that are of those costs are dollars that are not going into the service. Right. So that, I do this because efficiency is real simple. Less in for more out. And that's not what happens.
And they have just another line item, which is shareholder profits, company profits, that it just comes off the top.
That's exactly right. And, when they privatized Medicaid, they did in Iowa and Kansas. It's just real simple. It's money. You're going to say you're going to do it cheaper. What are you going to do? You're going to give less care. And that's exactly what happened.
So what is the how we can fight back part of the equation here? What is, whether it's, over the past couple of years, we've seen pushes to privatize our parks, and we're seeing it now with libraries. I know you've written about that as well. What can we do? Is the fight a local fight? Is it a national fight? Is it a federal fight, or just simply an ideological one?
Yes. So I'll go through each one. So at the local at the deal level, at the local level, they're going to privatize a park, they're going to privatize a library, and all that. The most important thing is to ask questions. Right before, like Chicago, that's why I say Chicago is a cautionary tale. No questions were asked right beforehand. Questions like, all right, they say they're going to make money, right? Well, why can't we make that money? Number one, and how much are they going to make, and how much are they going to take, and how much of the meters prices, as you know, went way up, and what decisions are we not going to be able to make because we've signed a legally binding contract. Crucially important, in libraries, what's going to happen to the book collection? Who's going to be able to make the decisions about, the diversity of what's in the stuff you can take out? So, most important to ask those hard questions, and connect them to the larger public purpose. All right, parking meters. Let's set aside parking meters. Transportation. Roads. Roads are about mobility, right? Roads are about we need to move around. So if we privatize a road that has a non-compete clause in it, meaning you can't build mass transit that competes with it, what's that going to do to our ability to, move people around and move? So that's the first thing. At the ideal, and number two is we set standards, right? And that can be done at the federal, state, and local level. We estimate that there's about $2 trillion of spending, all levels of government, on procurement, on buying goods and services. That gives us a lot of power to set standards to make sure those things are done well, the jobs, the quality, et cetera, et cetera. We should be setting standards for and applying those standards to everything we do, every decision, every land use decision at a local level, every federal spending or regulatory decision at the federal level. And then I'll just, one last thing about sort of the ideas.
So in other words, just when you're talking about procurement, those contracts come with strings.
Absolutely.
Right.
They should. We should, there's...
and we see that in the context of federal contractors need to maintain a higher minimum wage. The Biden administration attempted to do it also with vaccine mandates, with non-discrimination issues, and we can be more. We can make those more extensive and
more extensive, more aggressive, and more direct. And but remarking that it's remembering and putting at the center of that what it's about. Why do you raise the wages of the contractors? Well, first off, because we are driving inequality. If we're paying for $2 trillion worth of stuff, and there's a couple million people that are making less than $12 an hour, that one study found, we are creating more equality with our public dollars and our public decisions. So it's really important. Inequality, climate, racism, the big stuff, that's what these decisions are all about. All right. And we should make sure that every one of those decisions does that. So absolutely. The last part, sort of the ideological part, is I think it's really important for all of us to, we say it in the book, surface the state around us, right? We're not always necessarily clear about the role of the public all around us. You turn on the water and you turn on the tap and the water comes out. It's kind of a miracle, I think. It's a public service. The paint on our walls used to have lead in it. It doesn't because of a public action, regulatory action. And so it's important for us to recognize that and raise that up to remember the public purpose of that: health, safety, the essentials, the public goods.
What is this notion of a submerged state is, I think is huge, frankly, because I don't think there's no way. The classic cry of get the government's hands off my Medicare, that type of thing. What needs to happen in that instance? I would imagine on some level it's also just a function of maybe we need more civics back in our schools on some level, but we also need our politicians to remind people. This seems to be an ideological problem that we've had, frankly, with the Democratic Party, because you had people like Bill Clinton, and there was a story out today, I guess, by ProPublica about the abject failure of his welfare reform. And we've talked about that for years around here, but the ideological notion of, a leaner a government that is not an obstacle is completely, wrong from an ideological perspective, but it's also 180 degrees upside down from what the reality is. Nothing would happen in our society without what our government has either done or is doing in any given moment.
That's exactly right. It's the politicians, it's the opinion class, as it were. I guess we're all a part of that, right? It's a whole lot easier to complain about stuff, right? And we're in an environment, and like we said earlier, that we're in a 40, 50-year environment of anti-government attacks. That stuff is deeply embedded in us, right? And then, those of us that have been advocates for many years, it's, you get so far, but you don't get all the way. And there's a tendency for us not to celebrate the stuff we won because we're thinking about what we left behind, the part we didn't get, right? So I think there's a part of us that comes back to us, the active class, the active, in folks in movements and organizations and things like that. It's all of the above.
Well, the book is The Privatization of Everything, How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. It was co-written with Allen Mikaelian. Donald Cohen will put a link to that at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right, folks. Going to head into the fun half of the program. We're going to take your phone calls at 646-257-3920. A reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget about Just Coffee. JustCoffee.coop. It's a cooperative in Madison, Wisconsin. They not only run their business. Their business is a co-op, but they're also incredibly helpful to the farms that they buy from, whether that's in Central America or Latin America. But they have a great relationship with those folks, and the coffee's great. And you can also get the Majority Report blend. So win-win. And if you use the coupon Majority, you get 10% off. So check it out, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. What else? If you go to Majority Live now, you will see that the live show has been updated May 15th at 2 p.m. Some seats, a couple of seats have opened up. Still have some seats on the mezzanine, did you say? And up top level, up for the Wilbur in Boston, Massachusetts. And so check that out. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian Media Universe?
Tonight we'll be doing a Left Reckoning, 8 Eastern, 7 Central. We'll be talking about Aaron Rodgers being an Atlas Shrugged reader, and if you should be too. And also we'll talk a little bit about Tim Kaine in the snow lane and what it means for American infrastructure. So that's tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
We have a great clip from, what's her name? I can't remember her name now. Who? I can't hear you. Dana Perino, right? Yeah. I mean, during the Bush administration, we always thought that Bush was the dumb one, but she is making a case that, in fact, as his spokesperson, she also had no clue what was going on. But we will play that clip in just a moment. Also, before we head into the fun half, I will read you this, just because occasionally we get emails from listeners. And I always want to read them if they're apropos. This comes from, I don't know if she's a listener, Daniela. Maybe she saw it on YouTube. What the fook do you mean cancel Jimmy? Subject line was Jimmy Dore. Did we ever say we were going to cancel Jimmy? How do we cancel? Can we cancel? I would cancel him. If I was in charge of programming, I would cancel him.
I mean, yeah, I don't think we think he's worth attention. Is that canceling?
Oh, no.
I mean, people's audience, he's worth our attention.
Yeah, without a doubt. You sound exactly like the self-serving, righteous, undemocratic prick of an idiot you are. Now, I think that's a way of saying that I'm authentic. Right? I mean, I should sound exactly like I am. I'm not sure I totally agree that it's undemocratic to say that Jimmy Dore's an idiot. I'm not sure I find that, but I mean, as a Jimmy Dore listener, I would imagine that there's some things that might be a little bit challenging to express. You know, Jimmy would have been canceled long ago if it were up to a-holes like you, but he's not. Know why? Because it's up to us, not you. And canceling you is up to us too. Remember that, in all caps. I would just say, when you say it's up to us to cancel Jimmy or not, I would say I'm part of that us. I'm not part of the us that would cancel me. That's you and Jimmy. But, I mean, I'm part of the us that could cancel Jimmy if Jimmy was going to be canceled. I just wanted to read that just because I thought it was funny. You send me an email with all caps. There's a good chance, at different points, there's a good chance I'm going to read it on air, just because it's that's my jam. Matt,
it'd be very funny to ask if we did a video titled "Cancel Jimmy," asking people to please cancel Jimmy Dore, not just saying this thing is about vaccines. Is silly.
Right. Folks, please cancel Jimmy Dore. Cancel him. I don't know exactly what that means, but cancel him. Have him canceled. Cancel. There's a bunch of people I would cancel. But I only say that because I got the email.
Did we cancel Dave Rubin?
Did we cancel Dave Rubin? We tried.
Is that what we did to him?
We
just defined him.
We defined him. That's all I'm really interested in defining Jimmy as well. Let's go. Let's see. Crab, Salt, and Cracker says, part of Jimmy's rant you didn't play yesterday, including him mentioning six-figure MSNBC contracts when calling out people like TYT, Sean, and et cetera for being CIA. He's too scared to even mention Sam by name. Well, he was not referring to me if he's talking about a six-figure MSNBC contract. I will tell you that my MSNBC contract has been worth not quite three figures. In this past year. It's sort of contingent upon when I go on. I haven't been on MSNBC, I think, in a year. The Peacock thing has been over for 4 or 5 months now, I guess, 3 or 4 months. But I still have a three-figure deal with MSNBC, so that may come in handy soon. We're going to take a quick break. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half of the program. We will get to your phone calls in just a moment. Yesterday, we covered a clip of New York City's new mayor, Eric Adams. He was talking about the subways and how he said there was no dignity in living on or sleeping on a subway car, and then went on to say that I guess the real dignity comes from having one of his cops arrest you or take you off of the subway car. That's where the dignity comes in, I guess. instead of actually like maybe figuring out a way that we could house people. He gave another press conference, ostensibly trying to convince people to go back to their offices. Now, let's be clear here. There's only one thing that is preventing people from returning back to their offices, and that is they don't want to come because they're afraid of getting COVID. There's no mandate that's preventing them from coming in. There's no obstruction. And then the interesting thing also about this is that Eric Adams seems to think that everybody is his. You'll understand when you play this.
If my businesses are sharing with their employees, you are part of the ecosystem of this city. My low-skilled workers, my cooks, my dishwashers, my messengers, my shoe shine people, those who work in Dunkin' Donuts, they don't have the academic skills to sit in a corner office. They need this. We are in this together, and we should be saying to our...
Okay, and it goes on, but first off, I mean, put aside like they don't have the academic skills to whatever. And put aside his sort of verbal tick where everybody seems to be his. If you really want everybody to be in this together, maybe the way you do this is rather than beg people to come into their offices because they don't want to, so that they can provide business for the people who are desperately excited to come into their Dunkin' Donuts job, maybe what you need to do is push for some type of help so that people don't have to come into their Dunkin' Donuts job, particularly in the midst of a surge. This is the point that people seem to misunderstand. That people are not going into their work because they don't have to, and they don't think it's worth the risk. The reason why you shut down schools or you do remote learning right now is because you have so many teachers who are out and so many students who are out that there's no teaching going on there anyways. There's no learning that's happening there. You can't decide the pandemic's over because the virus decides. That's just the bottom line.
But they tried giving people recognition as essential workers. Isn't that recognition enough to make them get back now?
Well, that's the problem, is that the essential workers are there, but now the other people who are going to provide the business for the essential workers at the Dunkin' Donuts store, they're not coming in. That's what Adams is trying to promote. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 203 area code. I think this is somebody from Twitter. At least there was someone from Twitter who was a 203 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? What's going on? Is the phone up? The phone line's up? Hold on if you're on there. Is the phone line up? Yeah, it is. All right, let's try a different caller, and then we'll get back to that 203 in a moment. Let's see. Calling from a 208 call. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. My name's Kobe. I'm calling from Utah, originally from Idaho. That's the 208.
Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Oh, thank you. Just want to say, big fan of the show and everybody's work there. I was hoping to call in and kind of talk to you about the provider shortage situation. I've watched some of your coverage of it, and I'm just not sure that you managed to capture the problem.
The provider shortage?
Yeah, the healthcare provider shortage.
Okay, yes.
But, sorry about that. Yeah, so for some context, I work for a Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance carrier. I do marketing analytics for them.
Okay.
And this is something we've been tracking for the last year. And really, it's been, in the longer perspective, it's been a known problem. There are a bunch of analyses from 2016 through 2020 looking at how various states and rural areas are going to be severely impacted by just the fact that we're not training enough physicians. And in 2020, with COVID and everything, that's obviously been exacerbated. Everything, the whole trend has accelerated, but it's also, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. It's created this sort of doorway to overload physicians that are already stressed with digital tools and saying that that's enough, as opposed to actual policy change and removing barriers from training physicians. And
what do you mean overload? What do you mean overload physicians with digital tools? I'm not sure I follow what that means.
Sorry, a lot of language, sure. So in 2020, everything went virtual, right? With digital health exploding, you had all of these actuarial AI tools put out, you had telehealth programs, you had comprehensive pharmaceutical tools online and in mail, and all of these new digital products that health insurance companies all over the country are launching, or all these startups. For reference, I think from 2019 to 2021, digital health investment tripled to about $21 billion from something like $6.5 billion in 2019. So there's this provider shortage, right? And rather than training more healthcare providers,
you're making the existing ones theoretically more efficient, I guess.
That's the sale, exactly.
Right. But in fact, that's not necessarily the case.
No, not at all. A lot of, especially like United Healthcare, Cigna, their tech-forward portfolios, Optum, which is owned by United, and this new organization called Evernorth, which is kind of Cigna's response to that, are like basically they want to computerize doctors in a sense. They want to make them fully available and accessible digitally at any time. Right. They want primary care to be seamless between online and virtual utilization. And there are all of these big data and internet-based solutions that are going to solve all of our access problems because this provider shortage is just projected to get worse through 2030.
Right.
So I just wanted to kind of talk about that and bring it up in a way that I think fully contextualizes how the lack of doctors and the barriers into being trained in the medical field are creating this problem. Because
what are the barriers? Tell us what the barriers are. I mean, obviously, I guess the cost of medical school would be one of those barriers.
Cost of medical school, well, frankly, we don't have enough training facilities for our population is one issue.
I would imagine concentration of hospital systems is also another.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's another thing that's also a major facet of this is hospital system consolidation. It's rural hospitals being bought out, shut down, providers moved to more populous areas. Yeah, and sorry, that's a whole other side tangent, but yeah, there's barriers to becoming a medical professional, and rather than our political apparatus doing anything about it, it's just getting worse. We're training fewer and fewer physicians. There are some states where it's as bad as for every 6 doctors that will retire this decade, there will only be 4 to 5 doctors to replace them.
And obviously our populations are growing and in some respects getting a little bit sicker. Yeah, I mean, I think I think ultimately the problem is that, we've built a system where rewards go, the whole system is basically created to be almost this rat race, right? You go massively in debt. Therefore, you want to get high payouts to make it all worthwhile. You're putting people into professions that pay better than others within the medical field. I'm going to go into dermatology instead of, whatever primary care physician, because I'm going to make a lot more money. I'm going to pay off my bills, and I'm going to make it all worthwhile. This incredible process that has made me go through this. I mean, I think ultimately what we need to do is just flatten the whole thing. Diminish the obstacles by severely reducing the cost, if any, to become a medical professional. And the upside is not going to be, you're not going to make, showbiz money, but you're going to make a decent living, but you're not going to have the precarity that exists. We've got to cut down on the consolidation of hospitals. And make these things less of a profit center and more of a service for our citizens. That's basically what it seems to me that we got to do.
I agree. And if we're going to have health insurance companies, we should also require them have a stake in ensuring that they have doctors for their members. Ideally we wouldn't have health insurance companies, but if we're dumping money.
Well, listen, I appreciate the phone call.
Building tech schools.
Thanks.
Appreciate the time. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Let's try this again. Now we got 2 calls from 203 on there. Did we lose the other one? All right. Let me try this one. Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yes, this is you. Are you the guy who's on Twitter?
No, I'm better. Don't worry.
Shoot. Okay. Well, no, glad to have you on the show.
So, I'm Robert. I'm an engineer. I'm living in Tampa. I know 203 is from Connecticut.
Right.
But moved down here last year. Main thing I wanted to kind of bring up that I think, first of all, first time, long time.
Okay.
But I think that I'd love to hear on your show that would pair really nicely with the interview you just did, is about municipal electric and other municipal-owned utilities. For a lot of people who don't know, right now, basically, you pay into a service. You do not get to choose what company it is. Very often, there's only one in the town you live in that provides water. There's one that will provide electric, sometimes gas. But these are areas that we have a lot of control over because basically we can go to our city councils and push for municipal-owned electric and make the changes we want to see in our grid at a local scale, and then start to kind of pair them up with nearby towns. So really that's the main thing I wanted to kind of call in and mention. It's one of my kind of pet issues is municipal ownership of utilities. I think it would pair really nicely with the interview you just did.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I would nationalize these utilities, and then maybe you can then create a system where there could be local, some form of local control if necessary. But again, we have consolidation in these situations, and I can tell you, just like they want to enhance their profits. They're highly regulated in terms of what they can charge. They still need to pay their shareholders. So what do? Maybe they will. They won't be as vigilant in cutting down trees that might fall during an ice storm and cut off power for people.
That's right.
If you look at what's happening in California, PG&E, they created another fire out in California recently. All of this. And it does dovetail with what we just heard in terms of the privatization. It is pushing externalities onto society. It is privatizing the profits, and it is socializing the costs.
Socializing the losses.
And so when I, as a consolidated energy company, this is just an example. I'm sure there's 20, 30 other things that they have cut back on, but this is just the most obvious one to me. When I don't send out proactively teams to cut down trees that could threaten power lines, what happens is that we get an ice storm, power goes out for a day, and all of those customers, they pay for my failure to send out that team in advance. They pay for it because they buy generators. They pay for it because they buy fuel to fuel those generators. They pay for it because their food gets ruined in their refrigerator. They pay for it because they have no heat in their house. Maybe they've got to go somewhere else. Maybe they pay for it in terms of their health. I mean, there's a whole host of ways that they push off these costs onto these people. Now, the electric company, they don't get to charge people maybe for that day if people are smart enough to call up and say, I'm not paying for that, or whatever it is. I don't even know what the deal is. Maybe they don't even have the ability to stop them from paying for the electricity they can get that day or the power. But that's basically the way it works. And there's an example of that across the board. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. And there's no reason for it.
Yeah, and
there's no reason why we can't control that our own grid. You hire all the people who work, who manage it. You want to outsource it to the company. You can do that too, but it's just it's a lot less profitable of a business.
And not to mention that when we see big pushes to change our electricity generation, whether it's at the national level with, the what seems now dead Build Back Better bill. I hope it's not dead, of course. But when we see pushes to change the way we generate our electricity, what we're saying is, okay, we as a community will put in that investment and then immediately turn over the profits to these companies, unless we're willing to also say, hey, Eversource, for example, again, from Connecticut, Eversource, no more. Now it's going to be, the Connecticut state grid as a branch of the eastern grid of America. It's all of that stuff. You see companies like Eversource who operate in, I believe, 3 or 4 states now, and are, if not the exclusive provider in those states, the vast majority provider in those states. Like I said, now I'm in Florida, I'm in Tampa Bay. You see companies like Duke Energy who do the same thing. And the reason that I mentioned municipal ownership first, I have no problem with whether it's national or municipal. It doesn't really matter to me. It's just that municipal, we've seen some steps towards making it work in different places. So there are, within Florida, I believe there are 30 jurisdictions that have municipal electric grids. There are several in Vermont as well. And I'm sure there are dozens in every state that I don't know about.
Right.
And the reason that I bring that up is just because very often we see the news, we see the Build Back Better Act and the struggles it's having. We see the fact that Joe Manchin wants to remain invested in coal and wants to continue his profits from the coal industry. So he's going to continue us mainly getting energy from, or not mainly, us getting a lot of energy from coal.
Right.
And other fossil fuels. Whereas if it's more, if we can democratize it more, we can get more of a say, in addition to, of course, sharing in the benefits that it has.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, of course, working together to stave off the problems that it has.
Yep. Appreciate the call.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. All right. I think our other 203 caller is back. Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Camino Chavez.
All right, so now Camino.
Hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
El Camino Chavez on Twitter.
El Camino.
Nice to talk to you.
El Camino Chavez on Twitter. Now you tweeted at. Now I got to be honest. I don't know that I. Hold on. Let me see this right now. I just followed this thread. Okay, so you wrote, "Why is Sam Seder afraid to debate me?" Then.
Good point.
About and you linked to a piece on Scoon TV. No more mandates. Now, let's just to be fair, did I?
Yep.
What made you think I was afraid to debate you?
Man, I've been coming after you for a long time, Sam. I've been doing promos, wrestling style promos online. You know, calling you out every Friday night.
Every Friday night, you know, where?
It's coming to the cage, man. El Camino Chavez on Twitter. Join me in the cage.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it, but I saw this one. So you're here now. What do you want to debate me on?
I don't know. I was thinking maybe we'll do the vaccine mandates. How about that?
Okay.
Or continued lockdowns. I mean, we might agree. I'm not even sure what your stance on is that, but I'm assuming you're.
Well, I mean, you wanted to debate me, so yeah. Now I did print out your no more mandates. Do you want to make your argument there, and I'll tell you what I think. I mean, if your argument is what you wrote, I'll tell you why I think it's silly.
Yeah, I mean, I also want to add that there has been an update, and it's unfair if you don't know what the news is, but from New York Times they're saying that, a typical 75-year-old who contracted a flu for COVID now appears to present less threat to most vaccinated elderly people than the flu. So, and that's the main, them and what we say, usually obese people and people of certain health issues would be the people who are most at threat. All of them are able to get vaccinated if they want. The vaccines are supposed to work. Otherwise, the mortality rate has been 0.07 across the world. Why do we need to force people to get the vaccine when some people have really, first of all, think there's a freedom. People also have health issues that they're concerned about. Like I know a woman whose daughter had a really bad reaction to a vaccine, and she's a very left-leaning lady, and she's very afraid to get a vaccine that's been rushed. It's a new technology, and
what do you mean it's a new technology?
This mRNA, whatever it is.
Well, mRNA, it's actually been the technology has been around for a long, long time, actually.
This is not a new type of vaccine.
It's a new type of vaccine, but the technology, the mRNA technology, has been around for a long time.
Okay, so whatever the case is a new type of vaccine.
I mean, to be fair, the J&J was also a new type of vaccine, right? I mean, it's for COVID. Right. It's different. It's a different vaccine.
Sure.
It's a new COVID. But let's so what's your argument here? That we should not have vaccine mandates? Is that it, or that we shouldn't, or what? That COVID's not real? You know how many people have died from the flu? Do we predict or estimate essentially? We don't know exactly how many people die from the flu. We know more or less. How many people die from the flu on any given year?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I mean, surely you must have an idea because you know that this is less dangerous than the flu. So give me a sense. What's your guess as to how many people die from the flu each year?
Let me see. I'm going to guess. I'm going to say 300,000, something like that.
300,000. Okay.
300 to 500,000, I believe. I remember looking up before.
300 to 500,000 people a year die of the flu in the United States.
Right.
That's and so you're comparing that to COVID, where we've had approximately 400,000 people. It's a little bit more per year die, right? And you're thinking, hey, we live with the flu, and why can't we live with COVID? Right?
Well, we're going to have to live with COVID.
Right. No, I know we're going to have to. But I'm trying.
And there's always going to be new variants, right? That's
El Camino. I'm just trying to make an assessment of your argument. Now, what if I was to tell you? What if I was to tell you that that flu mortality is not 300 to 400 or 300 to 500,000 people a year in the United States? What if I was to tell you it was a little bit less? Would that start to change your calculus? Because you're saying If the flu kills 500,000 or 400,000 or 300,000 people a year, and COVID's killing, 400,000 or 500,000 a year, what's the difference, right?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying people shouldn't be forced to take the vaccine.
Well, but wait a second. But you cited to me.
Be forced to do it.
You
right?
cited to me. I just want to start with this point, and then we can move on to the vaccine mandates.
Sure.
But you cited that it is now. You just read a New York Times thing that said it's more dangerous. The flu is more dangerous for a certain cohort of people who are are vaccinated than COVID.
75 typical 75-year-old that's left in New York.
Now, why are you telling me that data point?
Why?
Yeah.
Because they don't force. Well, for example, we don't force people to take the flu vaccine, right?
Right. Now,
so
you're aware. Now I'm going to.
I'm not anti-vax.
No, of course you're not. Of course you're not.
I have the Moderna.
Of course you're not. Of course you're not. But you know what you are? You're anti-research.
Definitely. That'd be hard to defend. But okay.
Yeah. No, it would be very hard for you to defend because you are off on the flu numbers by a factor of 10 to 12. So the number of people who die annually in the United States from the flu ranges from not 300,000 to 500,000, but 30 to 60,000.
Okay.
Now, is it becoming a little bit clearer to you that if you have a 10 times more like opportunity for people to die in this country from COVID than the flu, because in some instances it's more lethal, and in other instances it's more contagious, that comparing it to the flu is absurd, right? I mean, when you say we don't mandate people take a flu vaccine, and then you find out that you are 10 times, maybe more, 12 times off on how fatal and what the mortality rate or numbers are for the flu, maybe it starts to occur to you, this is a different situation. Now, are you aware? Now, I'm reading your thing here, and it says, when you talk about the Chinese coronavirus here.
Right, which it is.
Yeah.
It is Chinese. It is from Wuhan lab. And
it's from Wuhan. It's from the lab.
No, who knows what's from Wuhan, right? So who knows how it got unleashed on the world?
Right, we don't know. Now, you say this oppressive mandate. You were talking about Bill de Blasio mandated that all private sector workers must be vaccinated, as well as having proof of vaccination of all 5 to 11-year-olds to be able to enjoy indoor dining, fitness, and entertainment. Okay. This oppressive mandate, you're right.
Yeah.
Now, what makes it oppressive? Like, do you think it's oppressive that you need to have a driver's license, let's say, to drive a car?
No, I don't.
What? Well, why?
I mean, it makes sense to be able to, show that you know how to drive a vehicle. You've been tested.
Why?
Because it shows that you can safely operate the vehicle.
And why is that important? Why do I care if you can safely operate a vehicle?
So you don't harm yourself or other people.
Other people. Interesting.
Yep.
Now, if I say you need a vaccine, you need proof of vaccine to enter into this public place where other people are there, why do you think that might be the case?
Because you might spread COVID to other people potentially.
Yeah.
Right.
And now we know it's 10 to 12 times more lethal, just in very broad strokes, than the flu.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about those numbers. I thought I read.
Well, you can trust me on this. You can look it up. I mean, it'll be the first time you look it up. It'll be the first time you look up those things. It's
and
about
with Omicron, it's equally lethal to elderly people as the flu. So, how long are we going to do this? How long are we going to force people to
Well,
to get a
I would
vaccine,
say
make medical decisions about
I'll
their
tell
own
you, I
body,
did an interview with
their own
somebody
body,
about that very question. How will we know?
This is different.
How will we know? How will we know when the pandemic is over? And I had this. I did an interview with somebody who had written a piece about that some time ago, and they said, I think that we will know that or be able to say that the pandemic's over when the death rate is somewhere in the neighborhood of what it is for the flu. And the flu in this country kills about, again, this is an estimate, about 88 people a day in normal times. And right now, what is the daily rate of death in this country from COVID? Do you know?
I don't know. I know that it's 5 million, 5.5 million people died, and in the world.
No, but in this country, just give me the approximate.
I'm going to say, yeah. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, honestly, but I'm going to say something like 3,000 a day. I don't know.
No, it's closer to 1,300. You know, I got to tell you, El Camino, this is what I find impressive about you. Okay, that you're writing on this topic, and B, that you're challenging a debate to me, and you don't even know the basic facts, like how many people are dying a day of the two things that you've mentioned, COVID and the flu. I mean, that's impressive. No. What is it that makes you feel?
I didn't know it at a daily. I didn't know it at a daily.
Yeah, and you didn't know what the flu numbers were.
I know it as a total rate. So what's the difference? Who cares? So the question is, how long are we going to force people to? We're going to shut down the economies. We're going to.
Well, now what economy are we shutting down right now? What economy? What economy?
From socializing when they need
El Camino
in vital years of their lives to socialize with other kids.
Well, tell me what's been your experience with your kids.
How long are we going to do this?
What's been your experience with your kids?
And how dare we for people for a mortality rate of 0.07, and it's less now with Omicron.
You don't even know what that means.
How long
you don't even know what that means.
How long are we going to force people to put a shot in their body of a rush vaccine from pharmaceutical companies that have plenty of history?
Why did you take the vaccine?
Corrupt. Plenty of history of being corrupt.
Why did you take of course I know it. Believe me.
You know it for sure. And I know you know this.
Why did you take the vaccine?
Why do we expect people to trust them?
Why did you take the vaccine?
For a mortality rate of 0.07. I know one person who died. I know a shitload of people. I know one person who died. I was in New York City. I was working.
Why did you take the vaccine?
One person, and he was fat and he was unhealthy, and it's very unfortunate that he passed away. And he was a great guy, but one person.
You know one person who died.
I know. It's anecdotal.
Are you?
I know a lot of people.
Are you telling me? Wait a second. Let me ask a question. Are you telling me that the numbers 800,000 deaths of Americans? You don't believe that? Because you only know one person who died.
No, I do. I totally believe that. Believe that.
Okay, so
I totally believe that, but I'm saying it has been an overreaction. It's an exaggeration. Anybody who is in any danger of dying from COVID, and most people are not at all. Most people are not. Those people can get vaccinated. They can wear masks. They can do anything they want to prevent, to boost their immune system, take any sort of therapeutics. They're not going to die from this, most likely. It is not.
Okay.
So how are we going to shut down small businesses?
What business is shut down right now? What business is shut down?
We're living in a very
El Camino, answer my question. What business is shut down? You talk about living in reality. What business is shut down right now?
What business? How many small? Look, being
what
a small business owner,
business is being El Camino? What business is shut down by the government right now? What business is shut down by the government?
How many restaurants and bars have shut down?
What business is shut down by the government?
Doesn't matter if they're shut down by the government or not. They're shut down by vaccine mandates. Or been shut down by.
They're shut down by vaccine mandates. They're shut down by vaccine mandates.
And having to close down for two weeks, and now having people come in and then scaring the hell out of everybody.
Why are people not going in?
So those businesses shut down. Those businesses they don't have to shut down by mandate from the government.
All right, listen
directly.
No,
it's indirect. It's indirect.
Dude,
clearly.
Honestly, go and do some reading. Go find out how many people are dying. Go find out how many places are being.
I have.
No, you haven't.
0.07% mortality rate, Sam. It's time to get over this shit.
Okay.
Good Lord.
Sorry, bud. You had your chance.
Dystopian reality you guys are putting this through. It's too much. It's
Dystopian reality. You don't even know any reality. There is not a single business that has been shut down by a government. If people don't go in to the business because they are afraid of getting COVID, like you say, if you're worried about getting COVID, wear a mask, we'll get vaccinated. And some people are going like, and I'm not going to go inside a bar.
What socializing outside of like during waves, like what socializing has been shut down? I could fly right across the country right now, no testing requirement, no vax mandate, to North Dakota and go see out my entire family and hang out with them. Like this idea that we're living in a 1984 style, like there's guards on the corners making sure you stay in your apartment. Like, what are you talking about? I tested positive for COVID and like literally like there's nothing. They're just like, hey, you got it. Good luck. Like, probably stay in there if you want to. There's no. I could walk into a business right now.
Yep. It was all just a function of whether you decided you were going to come in. Somebody just I am El Camino is a moron. Why waste the time? Well, one. The guy asked, was on Twitter, and I just happened to see it this time. Apparently, he's been doing it for months or weeks. But I do think that there is value in looking at the idiocy that is foundational to these opinions. Here's a dude who actually writes a 3-page piece here. No more mandates. There it is. This is a big piece. And the dude is off by a factor of 12 on the number of flu deaths. He has no idea what the daily deaths are to COVID. Like, in this oppressive dystopia we live in, the dude doesn't even, like, you would imagine that in this dystopia, there'd be massive digital signs wherever he walks telling us the deaths of COVID deaths of the day. Right? Hello, Mr. El Camino. Good to see you today. The death rate is 1,500 people died yesterday. Make sure you wear your mask. Right? That's what the automated doorbell as he walks out of his house would say. He gets into his car in this dystopia.
My question is, are these people all applauding Biden? Like, the now saying we're not going to do any sort of, we're not going to write checks to incentivize people to sit at home is what they're saying today for further COVID relief. Like, they should be applauding him now, right? Like, they should own their guy.
Who is it? Like, who is this guy talking to? Like, who is it? What mandates? What mandates? We got Eric Adams, the mayor of the biggest Democratic city in the country. And he's basically begging people who are working remotely to come in to support the dude working at the Dunkin' Donuts. How about we just support the dude at the Dunkin' Donuts?
Then we have a case where a new variant is actually getting around vaccines. So you're going to say, in the interest of being anti-authoritarian, that it's a person's right to go be served at TGI Fridays if they want by all the staff, because now all of a sudden, like, they're vaccinated, they should be fine with it, fine with feeding me and me breathing all over them.
Right, and it's not dystopia when we're forcing people to go into, coercing them to go into TGIFs and be a server. That's not dystopia.
Exactly. When we stop the eviction moratorium, when we cut off unemployment insurance, no COVID, that stuff's not. That's not authoritarian. It's the I can't go into McDonald's and breathe on the workers.
Right. This is like, the idea that we are being too coercive of people. I can't go to a bar unless I get vaccinated. That is dystopia. But I can't pay rent unless I go in and subject myself to possibly getting COVID from all the customers who come into this bar. That's not dystopia. One is overly coercive. The other is just like, that's just the American way. I mean, God, man, at least just do your basic, like, just basic reading.
Well, what's the
1,000 people a year die of the flu?
So people mention like gym closures, right? But so what's the unauthoritarian thing where we just allow gyms to stay open? But by the way, we'll pass a liability waiver for them at the start of COVID. So if their place of business becomes a massive location of infection, then they're covered for that. But right? Like, you have to actually think these things through a little bit.
The dude's not even looking up how many people died. He sees one number, 0.07. You know what 0.07 of 300 million is? Frickin' goofball. Unbelievable. Really, just impressive. Who could be stupider than that El Camino guy? Well, I give you Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin. I didn't even have to say the name, and I can see Bradley tee up that. Here he is calling in to the Vicky McKenna show on a local Wisconsin channel.
And by the way, I not only tested positive, but then I tested for antibodies, had a whopping level. So I had it, but I didn't have any symptoms. How do you explain that? Why would we just automatically assume that our natural immunity is going to be awful? It's going to be non-existent when generally you think the default position would be, if you've already had it, you're probably pretty well protected. Why have we assumed the worst? Why have we assumed that the body's natural immune system isn't the marvel that it really is? Why do we think that we can create something better than God in terms of combating disease? Now, there are certain things we have to do, but we've just made so many assumptions, and it's all pointed toward everybody getting a vaccine.
I wonder if Ron Johnson's ever taken any medication, and why he doesn't perceive that as an affront to God. Why is he wearing clothes? Does he believe that God is going to keep him warm? Why is there any human intervention in Ron Johnson's life when God is going to do it? Isn't it disrespectful to God? Why does he get into an airplane? Why isn't he just flying? This is stunning.
Do you think Johnson is smart enough to, when he does this, he's actually just fishing for the idiots?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I mean, I think he is, I don't want to say uniquely stupid in terms of the Senate, but he's up there. He's definitely competing with a lot of people for abject stupidity. But I think he also realizes, like, he's got to get the God Squad out there to vote for him. And that's the way he does it.
Right.
I mean, I got into a fight with a mover the other day. A friend's house when we were on vacation. Mover came in. Wouldn't wear a mask indoors. And he's like, masks aren't going to help you. God will take care of you. I'm like, well, maybe you have God carrying some of that stuff too.
It's funny, like, this sort of argument, like, masks, even cloth masks, they help like minutes. They give you minutes on the margin, right? But like, when people bring that up, they're not the people that are insisting, like, the government create N95s for everybody, so we have those all the time, right? It's always, no, fuck masks.
It is. I mean, it is just the most disingenuous. I mean, the idea of human intervention in anything is an anathema to them. That's all this is. This is all just ideological. their response to this. It is all just ideological, and it is, and some of it is founded on a deep religiosity. Really impressive stupidity. But we have another contestant for also one of the more stupider things said yesterday. This comes from Fox's Dana Perino. As you know, there was a massive ice storm in Virginia and really large parts of the eastern seaboard. The Virginia highway officials say that they didn't have the ability to pre-ice the roads. I guess it was on I-95 because it was going to get washed away in the rain. They got rain, and then it turned to, I guess, to sleet and to hail and to snow. I don't know if that's actually the case. Maybe it would have. Maybe it wouldn't have. My guess is that next time they'll put those salts down. But hundreds of people got stranded there for up to 24 hours. One of them was Tim Kaine, senator. There was others. Here's Dana Perino with a very unique theory as to why Virginia officials were unable to get these people out of those cars.
I want to point out one thing that I do not believe has been said yet. I talked to a state legislator there in Virginia, and he pointed out to me that in the last several years, many on the left made a decision that local sheriffs should not be allowed to have military-grade equipment, right? Because they said that that was a bad symbol and that it was...
Pause it for 1 second. I want you to take it back to the beginning, but I'm very curious about how those on the left were able to influence local sheriffs in Virginia in terms of what equipment they got. And I'd also like evidence that that dynamic even existed, even if it was not a function of many on the left. And I would also suggest there's a reason why no one else has said this yet. And I suspect there's a reason why no one else is going to say it after you. But let's start from the beginning. People really should absorb this.
I want to point out one thing that I do not believe has been said yet. I talked to a state legislator there in Virginia, and he pointed out to me that in the last several years, many on the left made a decision that local sheriffs should not be allowed to have military-grade equipment, right? Because they said that that was a bad symbol and that it was too militaristic and authoritarian. But imagine if they were still allowed to have the equipment that they had just a few years ago. It probably would have come in very helpful today.
Let's take a moment and imagine. Let's just take it for a moment and imagine that they don't have the equipment that they had a few years ago.
I mean, we got to do a better job appreciating our victories, because I did not know that we demilitarized the police in the past couple of years.
You didn't know that we demilitarized the police, and B, you didn't know what vehicles they had that could actually fly through snow.
Well, in North Dakota, all the cops drive around in those big riot vans all the time in the winter, and it's very good for getting through the snow. So.
Is that right?
Yeah, and tanks. They also have tanks.
The up armored stuff they drive through the snow, and then how many people can they fit in those up armored tanks?
You can fit about 4 or 5, I think.
Yes, I mean they apparently what they would do is they would take this fleet of up armored tanks that they would have, they would deploy them out to I-95.
Yeah, exactly. 94.
Pick up all these people 4 or 5 at a time. Well, you need the people. So you'd pick up 2 or 3 people at a time in these up armored tanks. They must go pretty fast through the snow, right? I mean, to get back to where they got to get to. You know what else would have worked? Plows. If they had plows. But the left, of course, got the sheriffs to get rid of the plows.
Went really far with the demilitarization. No big farm implements either.
Or maybe she's talking about those things that the things that spit fire, like one of those those gas tanks that you spit fire to eliminate people. Flamethrower, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
napalm.
Yeah. If we hadn't taken away the napalm from the sheriffs, then they'd be able to melt all the snow and not have been a problem. And I suspect no one else has mentioned that today. Man. And then, of course, and then what's the next segment Dana Perina does? Talks about how authoritarian it is that you need a double vax to go to a bar. Unbelievable. I really, honestly, days like today, I start to wonder, maybe it's time to wrap this whole thing up. I'm talking the country. I'm talking all of it. Just wrap it all up.
Nuclear option?
Forget it. That's the problem with demilitarizing the sheriffs. When it's time to call it quits on the country, there's nobody to blow you up. Oh my God. Call from a 978 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
It is you.
This is Mark in Massachusetts.
Mark in Massachusetts. Whereabouts in Massachusetts, Mark?
I don't know if you're familiar with Framingham.
Ha! Yeah, I am. I've driven through Framingham many times. Many times.
Yeah, it's just outside of Boston. Yep.
Yeah, listen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Chateau de Ville.
Chateau de Ville, no.
Yeah, because that closed. Used to be across from Ken's Steakhouse. That's where I saw Rodney Dangerfield 40 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah,
I'm
Ken's
familiar with
Steakhouse
Framingham.
is still open.
What's that? I know it is.
Yeah.
I know Route 9 well.
So the reason I was calling is because it's a common talking point, I think, in a lot of mainstream media to talk about polarization, and people like Jonathan Haidt talk about how we need to listen to people across the aisle. But to be perfectly honest, I find it very hard to empathize with conservatives because I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what principle they hold that leads them to think, oh, we can't have vaccine mandates during a pandemic because that violates individual rights, but the government also needs to arrest people for smoking pot. They make all these platitudes about individualism, but all of the policies they support are against any notion of individual rights. So, do you think that we should try we should try speaking across the aisle? But again, the reason I struggle with it is because it just seems incoherent what they're talking about.
I think I guess I go more for the wounded antelope theory. I think there's some that you can talk to, but for the vast majority of them, no. I think it's a fool's errand. I think there are some people, but broadly speaking, no. I think it's absurd. We have a polarized country, and so what? We have people who disagree about, what kind of country we should have. I mean, the big mistake that we have, now you're talking about Jonathan Chait, that guy from the New Yorker magazine? Or who are you talking
about? It might be. He's some prominent psychologist or something.
Oh, no. Okay, you're not talking about Jonathan Chait. Oh, Haidt. Okay. I mean, look, I think there are some people that we should reach out to with, Jonathan Haidt. Oh, okay. I misheard. I think there are some people that we can reach out to, but I think largely there is we're talking about fundamentalists and who subscribe to a fundamentalist worldview, or at least a mode of thought where it's, just like that caller that we had. They're talking about a dystopia. How do you write something without even knowing some of the basic facts of what you're talking about? I mean, it's stunning to me. I don't understand how you do that. And I think there are people that we could that could be reached with policies that are more, material based. But on some level, it's like you do it, and then you let people come around rather than trying and enticing people. Like I just don't. I think there's way too much time spent trying to negotiate with people who are not interested in negotiating. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I think, like you were saying, this idea that they don't really have a grasp on the facts of the subject that they're talking about, because I'm sure, as you remember, during the Bush years, a big talking point was like evolution and intelligent design in schools.
Yep.
And it's so bizarre to me to think that 15 years ago there were people saying like, oh, we need to teach the alternative theory to evolution in schools. And like when I hear that, I just go, what are you talking about? And again, I don't really know how you find common ground with people who just don't really believe in facts and who really, I don't even think are consistent even with their own principles,
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Well, appreciate the call.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye. Let's go to the IMs. Freddie from Framingham. I don't know if that was just Freddie, but just to piggyback off of Matt's hypothetical North Dakota trip, in Massachusetts, I could go down the block to my Stop and Shop, unmasked, yell out that I have COVID, and besides a fellow Majority Report viewer punching me in the face, nothing would happen. No brown shirts would come in and get me. What dystopian universe is El Camino talking about? When Massachusetts is one of the most loosey-goosey besides Vermont and COVID-19 mandates, the rest of the country is in big trouble. Update across from Ken's Steakhouse is leveled with a new hotel. Thank you. Another Matt. I used to be a fan of Chris Hedges. I think he's done a lot of great work in the past. And his book, Death of a Liberal Class, is one of the best and most prophetic books I've ever read. However, as of late, he seems to be crossing more and more into that Dorr, Greenwald, Tucker anti-establishment territory. But I don't think he's quite there yet. I just wanted your thoughts on him, if you have any. And if there's any interest in having him on as a guest, I think a good faith conversation between him and this group on the current state of the left would be extremely productive and beneficial. I mean, I sort of have this similar feeling that you do. I used to interview him quite a bit back in the day. I think I even hosted, I can't remember an event, I think on his book or something back in the day. I do think there are times where he, will sometimes, I think we once had a conversation about the debt, and I can't quite remember the contours of it, but I think he was concerned about China owning so much of our debt. I'm not sure that we had this on air, frankly. And I was like, well, they don't really own that much of our debt. And I don't really think that it puts us in that type of disadvantage. This was years ago. This was maybe a decade ago. And I think I don't know. I think I've had him on since then, but that sticks out at me. But yeah, maybe we'll have him on at one point. It'd be an interesting conversation. Let's see, more IMs. Liberal Lizard Queen. Hi, Sam. Did the CIA ask you to grow a beard to keep the Majority Report viewers horny and distracted? Yeah. Sam Seder, extenuating circumstances of silliness. When your guest was giving her definition of liberalism the other day, I really wanted you to interrupt me and mean like, oh, you mean like a Dave Rubin classical liberal. Marco Spaghetti. Sam can suddenly beat me up. Since his emergence of his new salt and pepper beard, I'd allow it. Fair enough. Laura. Hi, Sam. Do you think Ghislaine Maxwell will give up information on the rich and privileged people she and Epstein may have info on?
She should, because she got time.
I mean,
I don't know if she's been sentenced yet, but her charges are, I think, 4 to 5, if I heard right on True and On. She should.
I would imagine. I mean, what, are you really going to go to prison? Unless you're I have no idea. I don't really follow that too much, but
I think no, just because I'm a Vikings fan growing up and I learned to not to expect good things. But like, I don't know. I think a lot of people are surprised that she got sentenced or guilty, but I don't know. If she has stuff, it'd be fun to see it.
Yep. Laura says, we need to remember that a lot of health workers have long COVID and are exhausted. There's a lag between COVID infections and hospitalizations, but people still have accidents, heart attacks, and strokes. Hospitals will become overwhelmed. Exactly. That's the point. That is, on some level, that has always been the big fear, right? Was we need to flatten the curve. And the idea of flattening the curve was because you don't want hospitals to get overwhelmed, because hospitals can't take care of COVID patients. They also can't take care of people who have heart attacks or strokes or accidents, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it kind of throws a wrench in the whole do what you want thing if your hospital system is collapsed because of overflow of COVID patients.
And hospitals aren't just like overtaxed because of physical space. There's only so much time you can work a doctor or a nurse without them breaking down themselves. True North Politics. Any thoughts from the MR crew on the movie Don't Look Up? Is there any chance Majority Report can get Sirota on to talk about media reaction to the film? Yeah, we may do that. I mean, I'm glad the movie exists. I thought it wasn't my favorite piece of entertainment or satire.
I haven't seen it yet. Also, one thing to know about Sam is he's jaded for comedy at this point, I think.
I'm very jaded about comedy. So I'm coming at this from a different place. But I'm very, very happy that the movie has been a success. And anything that can even remotely be helpful to getting people to talk about climate change is helpful in my mind. Between the 101 and the 5, I recently took a flight for the holidays. Lots of people coughing, not wearing masks, masks down below noses and chins. Very high quality masks, tremendous public health failure. Well, that's the dystopia. Dolink, medical experts say that even though many of the Omicron cases are mild, there's no evidence that those who contact it will not suffer the same neurological, cardiac, and other long-term effects on the body. It is not benign, indeed. I'm president, KS1. I'm president of an education board in upstate New York. I had a kid tell me these days knowledge is soup and school is a fork. I mean, smart kid. I mean, look, it's very, very difficult to do this in the context of COVID. I feel pretty good about, what relatively speaking, where my kids are at. But I'm very, fortunate. Schools in Brooklyn, by and large, are pretty good. Is this me? Lightfoot locked out teachers from accessing their platforms for remote learning. Ugh, so ridiculous. As an American, it's my right to smoke in bars and restaurants. Sam, thank you. Your debate with El Camino is the same one I had with my I'm not an anti-vax but brother who contends his natural immunities are better than the vaccines he won't get because he has had COVID twice. Oh, my God. Bernadette. The U.S. is not the only place with absurd COVID rules. Here in Norway, teachers and daycare workers have gotten exemption from quarantine if they've been in contact with someone positive. They're legally required to quarantine in their spare time, but are still expected to go to work. That's absurd. Teachers here are so fed up with being treated like this. I think it's going to be a major quitting spree like never before. Sam Sexy Beard. My daughter's school of a little under 300 students had 90 students and 13 teachers out with COVID yesterday. If Joe wants teachers to quit their jobs, if they want to teach remote, I think it would have been the opposite effect he would want. The 0.07 is also the death rate each time you get COVID. So the more we let it spread and mutate, the more times you put yourself in danger. Number City. What about testing psychosis or whatever that official called it yesterday? Another conspiracy? Lymphalis. Sam, have you seen the Mike Hawk testimony? Jackass. Colin from Nebraska. Have you ever heard of Corey DeAngelis? He is with School Choice Now in Cato. His reach has grown since 2020 from 17,000 to 83,000 followers last year or so. He visited Pete Ricketts last year. His dumb response to the Chicago teachers was, if Walmart employees don't show up for work, families can take their money elsewhere. If public school employees don't show up to work, families should be able to take their children's education dollars elsewhere. What if all retail store employees don't show up for work? This is so stupid. Wait, did Corey DeAngelis write that book about Matt, do you remember that pre-tape I did with some guy who wrote a book? He was embedded at Success Academy for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who that was. Yeah, what? Yeah, who is that?
Robert Pondisio.
Okay, no, a different guy. That guy, who was a fan of charter schools, conceded that, well, what the charter schools do is they don't actually weed out, they don't cherry pick the kids, they cherry pick the parents as a proxy. And so they set up requirements for parents that will filter for parents who have either the material ability or resources, or drive for that matter, to make sure that their kids are more engaged with school. And which of course is, the same as filtering out kids in many respects. Omicronic 420. Hey, Sam, in regards to the teacher shortage, DT COVID, Governor Whitmer in Michigan has done an emergency ruling to allow for secretaries and parapros and other trusted staff to substitute teach until the end of the year. Thought this was interesting, although as a former teacher union organizer, it makes me a bit queasy to see the right-wing legislatures taking that and running with it to further bust unions. Yeah, it's a problem. BB Teach, a great interview in Suffolk County, New York. A private company in Virginia runs a school bus camera program for people who pass a stop school bus. Terrible customer service, and to my mind, an excessive penalty, $250 for first offense, half a week's pay for a minimum wage worker. Sam's tight pants. Candidate alert. Hello, MR crew. I'm sure you're keeping a list of candidates to talk to in the 2022 cycle. If you haven't already, Bradley, add Lucas Kuntz to that list. He's running for Senate out of Missouri. Works with Matt Stoller at the American Economic Liberties Project and is showing to be a real grassroots champion and messaging guru to win a state like Missouri. Oh, that would be a good interview. But does he have Claire McCaskill's endorsement? Mojo Mine. I foresee a possible attempt at the beginning of the privatization of the Mississippi River. The Army Corps of Engineers had one section of the lock and dam in Minneapolis for sale several years ago. What side of the river do you want to live on? AJ in Colorado. Our school district, Colorado Springs D11, started the year without a mask requirement, but quickly put one in place when our county COVID incident rate hit the district's predetermined crisis point of 200 out of 100,000. Then the elections occurred and our school board took on a far-right majority. The mask requirement was immediately dropped 1 week before Christmas break, and even though the county COVID incidence rate was by then close to 400 out of 100,000. Now, with Omicron raging, the county's incidence rate is 800 out of 100,000 and rising quickly, yet the school district still refuses to reinstate its mask requirement. The kicker? They also acknowledge that they expect many COVID cases amongst faculty and are encouraging parents to volunteer as substitute teachers. It's just insanity. It's just insanity. What should we play? Should we play the Ted Cruz and Sean Hannity, or let's play Joe Manchin. Here's Joe Manchin last night speaking to reporters as to whether he might be amenable to a filibuster carve-out for voting rights legislation. What's that? This is the Build Back Better one? Yeah. Oh, well, let's do this one. Let's do this one then. Where he is with the Build Back Better negotiations.
The Electoral Count Act, is that something that you've been talking to Republicans about? And would you support Build Back Better if child tax credit was not included?
I'm really not going to talk about Build Back Better anymore because I think I've been very clear on that. There is no negotiations going on at this time, okay? And there's an awful lot of things that had a lot of things that were very, I think, well intended, and there was a lot of things that was pretty far reach on some things in the most delicate times that we have right now, and our country's divided. And I don't tend to do anything that divides our country anymore. So whatever I can do to unite and bring people together, and that means you have to work harder as you work across the aisle to bring people together.
One more.
What? This dude has to be so careful with every word that he says. Because it's like one of those things where you just start telling so many lies, you forget, like, wait, what did I say? Useless. He's useless. And I don't know. This guy, it's amazing to me, the incompetence that the administration is showing in dealing with this guy. Keep underestimating his willingness to do absolutely nothing. So Sean Hannity apparently was texting with Mark Meadows in the days up to leading up to the January 6th riot on the Capitol. And he was talking about the plans that the president was telling him and what he was seeing coming out of the White House counsel. And at one point he told Meadows, like, we can't lose the entire White House counsel. He's talking about the lawyers in the White House who are basically saying, like, you can't do what you're trying to do. Here is Ted Cruz on with Sean Hannity on January 5th, 2021, which indicates that, at the very least, Ted Cruz had a notion of what was going to happen tomorrow, January 6th. And that Sean Hannity did too. Now remember, it's not like, oh, there's going to be a rally tomorrow, right? Or that the president's going to give a speech. Or that we're going to vote on certification for the president. Or even that, like, I'm just going to vote no on the certification even though everybody else will vote for it. So the January 6th commission has asked Hannity to cooperate because he shows up in all these texts that he sent to Mark Meadows. And he's not doing this as a reporter, incidentally. When you write, we can't lose the White House counsel, you're not reporting. Go ahead.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz joins us. Senator, thank you for being with us. Big day tomorrow. Big crowds apparently showed up to the point where the West Wing could hear the music and the chanting of the people that were there already. And this all kicks off in the morning tomorrow.
Well, Sean, that's right. And tomorrow is an important day. We have an obligation, I believe, to protect the integrity of the election and to protect the integrity of the democratic system. And so last week, as you know, what I did is work to bring together a group of 11 senators. I spent about 20.
Yep. Big day tomorrow. It's almost like they're building up expectations for something that they either thought might happen. I don't know. Interesting.
I had it in Slack. Holly was doing the same stuff, of course. I mean, that's the bizarre thing about this is like even in December, there was like Jan 6 is the day. I'm pretty sure Trump tweeted it out. Everyone knew that they were going to try something, got to do something. And they did something.
Yep.
You want to watch the Holly clip?
What's that?
You want to watch the Holly clip?
The Josh Hawley? Yeah. Which one is that?
Matt, you just added that in Slack?
Yeah, I added it in Slack. It's from January 4th, 2 days before.
Yeah, Hawley knew what was going on too. Completely lying and building this up.
Okay, gotcha. What is the ultimate goal here? You've talked about it a little bit differently than Senator Cruz has. What are you trying to overturn the election as it stands now and to keep President Trump in the White House as of January 20th?
What I'm trying to do, Brett, is to raise the concerns that my constituents have all over Missouri. I have heard from people like I've never heard before over the last month about this election. They have major, major concerns about the integrity, the fairness of this election, and they expect me to stand up and to raise those concerns. And this is the only forum I have to do it. This is the forum that the Constitution and the statutes provide, and they also want action. They want an investigation into these irregularities. They want new election laws to make sure that our elections are secure going forward. This is my chance to stand up and speak for them, and somebody has got to take their concerns seriously and speak up, and that's what I'm going to do.
I mean, prime example of basically Hawley stoking these things. I mean, it's these concerns that he's talking about. There's a way that he could address those concerns and say, like, you know what, it's not real.
Yeah, I looked into that, and it's bullshit, turns out.
Turns out not real.
Oof. And then he could have raised his fist like he did on January 6th and be like, not real, guys. That would have been a good way a better way, let's just say.
In fact, I was looking at a document and that the Giuliani team has prepared, and it's not only not real, they think that the Majority Report's the 10th most important social media conservative outlet in the country.
And this is what Dan Crenshaw is doing. So you don't have to be like some lib. Dan Crenshaw is, I mean, to a certain extent, I'm not sure how complicit he was before this, but since he's been, yeah, that was bullshit. That's what you got to say, Josh.
Jack Torberg, do you know if Donald Cohen's book will be on the audio book one day, or has he said whether that's in the cards? I have no idea. Eric Berg, 59. Hello. Wouldn't it be nice to compare January 6th uprising to the Soviet general's attempt to make a coup against Gorbachev in 91? Might be. Lib Sock Joe. The Congressional Progressive Caucus announced this morning that they are endorsing the Judiciary Act to add 4 justices to the Supreme Court. Is there anything to this, or is it just dead in the water and not going to meaningfully move the needle? I do not think that it's going to meaningfully move the needle, but I'm sure on some level it will create some amount of pressure somewhere that there is movement in this direction. And maybe there'll be other things that have to be respond. Maybe it'll impact Stephen Breyer's decision to retire. I don't know. Sam's calf mustache. Sam, your beard says dignified and educated, but your stash still says windowless van. Crab saltine cracker. Part of when these douchebags say 0.07 death rate, they just mean I personally don't think I'll die, so F everyone else. His latest tweet about his call. Camino, whatever. I mean, people can listen to the call. He should post the call because we will cut it. The issue with COVID is not that it's significantly deadlier than the flu. It is, but it's not the issue. The issue is that it's incredibly contagious, and that causes extreme stress on medical systems, which, unless we triage out unvaccinated lunatics, we should, will cause people to die of other preventable, treatable illnesses. Also, it's 50K per year for the flu. Nearly 10 times as many dead from COVID as from Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined, but we're overreacting. All-cause mortality of All-cause mortality of severe COVID survivors within a year of recovery is 200% higher than uninfected, and that's controlled for age and pre-existing conditions. All-cause mortality of severe COVID survivors. Oh, interesting. January 6th is more like when Yeltsin shelled Parliament. JJ Cool. A lot of liberals I know, or generally see, come off as intelligent and reasonably caring people. Do you think they just ignore the evidence that privatization is destructive out of greed, or is it something else? I think it's just ignorance. I think that we, just broadly speaking in the society, are told to venerate business people.
Do a deal, okay? Just do a deal for the parking spaces.
And you know, look, the fact is that we have this ideology in this country that, you know, and there's so many signifiers in this country basically say, like, you are that we have a merit-based system, and if you're a wealthy CEO, then you deserved it, that you have some, you know, righteousness. And that's what that comes from. Ron Quixote. This moron is just trying to chase clout by trying to debate you. What a clown. Listen, I'm happy to debate anybody. And if for whatever reason you've been challenging me on a Friday night on Twitter and I haven't seen it, call into the show. Elon's pungent Musk, a candidate for the craziest and worst COVID response is Montana, which made COVID a protected class. Some of my friends said a coworker came to work after testing positive and couldn't send her home. Oh my God. All right, we'll take one more call. We got people who've hanged on the phone for over an hour and 20 minutes. The final call of the day is an 859 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, hi Sam. This is Tyler. I'm actually from Indianapolis, so 317 area code.
Well, your phone is 859, so I don't know what to tell you, Tyler.
Yeah, it's a long story, but so I was wanting to call about. So I'm actually a Marine Corps veteran myself, and after I got out of the Marine Corps, I started getting interested in the extremism that I was seeing coming from the right wing in this country, and part of it came from my experience in the Marine Corps, because one of the last platoon I was in turned out to be full of what I think were white supremacists.
Oy.
I was very shocked, and it took a while for me to register what exactly I was actually experiencing when I was there.
Wow. What was it? Like, how did you get a sense of that?
I mean, it was pretty blatant. Like, we had one black member of my platoon and a few people of other races or whatever, and there's just the stuff you would hear coming from the mouths of a lot of the white NCOs and stuff was shocking. Right. And the biggest issue was that when I was hearing all this, it was we were all in deployment, so there was like no way to escape any of that. And now it's led me to the point where, sorry, I'm a little nervous, but
no, you're doing fine.
Now it's led me where I'm actually going to school for sociology, and I'm interested in studying some of these issues I've been seeing growing in this country.
I think we've done one or two interviews about that, and I just saw another book. I think talking about. I think that's a huge problem, both in the context of the military and in our policing. And I think
so, like the military, I know, like as we saw in the last election, especially from other branches. I can't speak on the Marine Corps itself, but like the Army, the Navy, and all of them, they were more likely to vote for Biden, of course, than they were Trump. But I think in the Marine Corps, which, don't get me wrong, I'm proud of my service and I'm proud of the branch I served in.
Right.
However, there are issues that come with the Marine Corps because there's a little bit of a cult mentality, and it kind of breeds, like it gives a lot of room for these kind of people to find their way in.
Oy.
I mean, even with some of the Hispanic people I served with, some of them were hardcore racists themselves. So it wasn't just a white person problem either.
Right.
And I noticed it more than I ever noticed it with any interactions with any other branch, because I served alongside the Navy as well. Didn't really see it there. Not nearly to the extent I saw it with the people I served with more directly. And I've noticed in our institutions as well, the kind of extremism that's been growing. And I know it's been growing since long before I was even born. I'm only 25 myself, so it's not like I've been on this planet for super long. But, like, I know a lot of the stuff we see today is kind of like a reaction to the 1960s and civil rights movement. And to a lesser extent, the kind of the defeat of the labor movement that came before.
I think that's a big. I think that's a big part of it too, and I also think that these types of fundamentalism and bigotry grow in intensity as the numbers of people shrink. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that there's a white knuckle quality to this. I think that is there. And I think you hit bouts of intensity. And frankly, you know, I also think that having a black president broke the brains of a lot of people.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I just had turned 19 during the 2016 election, so that was my first presidential election to vote in, and that's when I just joined the Marine Corps myself. I'd only been in for a short time, and that's where I started seeing some of the extremist attitudes start to pop up. But it was a lot more extreme as his presidency went on.
Yeah,
that's when I saw people getting a little bit more open about their bigotry. And I mean, even with like our institutions, like we talk about police. I mean, they've always had their issues, but there's now what's the word I'm looking for? There's a more open acceptance of the blatant, like, racism we see, whereas it used to be more of kind of like under the rug. It wasn't better, but it was definitely like wasn't talked about. And now we see people who actively support and applaud when they see some of the actions we see from police. Like during the protest, my first protest for Black Lives Matter, we got shot at from police officers because one person graffitied, and they shut down our whole protest, or tried to. And then they immediately went to tear gas, rubber bullets, all the good stuff. And it's like, I don't know, it's shocking for someone who served and who, very quickly learned what I was actually serving, and not the ideals that I was told beforehand.
Well, I appreciate the call, and good luck with the studies.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sam.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm trying to remember where we've heard that before about the Marines. Like, I think Catherine Ballou had that book about Vietnam, but there's something about the Marines particularly. And if anybody has a recommendation on that, I'd be curious.
All right, we're going to read 5 more IMs, and then we're going to get out of here. Ray, El Caminos knows he's wrong and have run out of arguments as soon as he starts filibustering and not answering Sam's questions. Michael from Bavaria, the new Reaper drone, now with tow chains. Jonathan Armstead. Jonathan Haidt was on Bill Moyers years ago and argued that conservatives should argue with liberals on liberal talking points, that English should be a national language because it reduces hate crimes. And liberals should argue with conservatives about liberal talking points, that immigration should be reformed because it would create a higher Christian population. He's offensive to all people named Jonathan. It just is absurd. I mean, there's sometimes I think some people who are in academia who need to spend more time outside of academia. James Darwin. Sam, could have sworn you had Hayes on the show when Michael was still alive. Maybe his book, A Colony in the Nation? Yes. Yep. Oh, we got to get Hayes back on soon. Bill Barr's breathtakingly bulbous, beer-battered backside. Anti-vax and vax skepticism is a worldwide thing. Just had to cover my Kordenken co-workers shift over in Christmas and New Year's here in sunny Germany because he was quarantined at home after testing positive. Just saw him back today, and since his case was mild, it's only confirmed his belief that the jab is unnecessary. Some people's kids, man. Yeah, no kidding. Jim Raps. Hey, Sam, I was wondering if you believe in what Jank has been going on with lately, that the MSM is a cult of their own. I to be honest with you, I have not been following that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, how does that add to like the Chomsky hypothesis, for instance? Like, it sounds agreeable enough in that context, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I don't know exactly what it is. Louis, anyone know what's going on with Representative Marie Newman and her pharma stocks? Are Justice Democrats just going to let this slide and hope voters don't know about it? I have not followed that, but we should check into that. Two more. Rory Gatto. Bradley, will you check that out? Rory Gatto. If Emma doesn't show up for work, I should be able to take my subscription elsewhere. There was a study out of University of Minnesota said you are just under 300% more likely to die within a year if you get severe COVID and are under the age of 65 than if you didn't get. We just saw that. We got to check that study out. Will you look for that too, Bradley? I wonder if that must be Olmsted. Is it Olmsted or I always get his name wrong. All right, final IM of the day. Let's see what we got here. Nicole from Buffalo. I had a conversation with my boomer Gen X cusp dad about welfare, and he has internalized Reaganism so completely that I felt like I was talking to someone from a different planet. I've managed to pull him over on basically every social issue, but he really buys into the small government mythology. Well, have him listen to the show. This is a boomer Gen X cusp friendly space.
It's big of you to admit that.
Huh?
It's big of you to admit that.
I mean, I'm not boomer. I'm really more Gen X cusp. I'm actually Gen X.
Right.
Right. Matt, Bradley, good job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know some